This is part one of a video series on how to build a 440 Mopar. Now, this particular block is not a complete build. It started off as a motorhome 440 with virtually nil as far as wear, so I just honed it out. Part one, which I'm going to be featuring right now, is probably the least tech extensive of anything you're going to see later on, because all I'm going to do is clean up the block and paint it. Now, when I paint the block, I want it to last a really, really long time because I use them for dyno motors. I used to use them for magazine articles. I would reuse engines for years and reconfigure them, and I didn't want to have to repaint it every time. So I wanted the paint to last a super, super long time. So I'm going to go over all of that stuff and the cleaning. I do things a little differently than the norm as far as the cleaning, and it works for me. So let's get started with part one, and if you like it, please like and subscribe, because that's going to be the lifeblood of keeping this channel going, and it's just a click away. So let's get right into part one. Before we really get started, I want to talk about the hone. I honed this block months ago when I first took it apart, and there's various ways you can go when you're doing the honing job at home. At the machine shop, it's a whole different ballgame. You pay your dough and you get your engine back ready to assemble. Now, here's some of the tools that you're going to run across. Basically, this is going to be the whole range. Now, this is called a hone. It's a three-legged hone is what it's usually referred to as, but actually what this is a deglazer. So it's not really going to change the cylinder bore shape or taper or anything like that too much. Unless you're really, really going after it, you have a dial bore gauge and you have the concentration of I don't know who, but you want to have kind of a rough finish on this, like 180 or 220. That's going to give you the best bore finish, in my opinion. You may have other opinions, but that's the three-legged hone. What I have here is the brush hone. Now, dingle ball or whatever you want to call it, this thing is a surface finish only tool. It'll give you a good surface finish, and it'll give you a good nap for ring seal, so it has value. It's not junk. Oftentimes I'll use the three-legged hone just to hit the bore, give it the crosshatch I want, and then I'll hit it with the brush hone just basically to give it that plateau finish. Some of you guys might have seen this in a previous post on maybe social media or whatever. It's a three-legged hone with Scotch-Brite zip tied to it. I use this for cleaning stuff up. Now, I don't have an aggressive Scotch-Brite pad, which is going to glaze the bore. These green pads take off no metal, but it'll get in there and it'll clean out dirt. Like this block was sitting around for a long time, and I'll run this through there just to clean up loosen up the dirt or dust or whatever. It won't really even take off rust because it's just not that aggressive. And finally, this is actually a real hone. This is a Sun & Hone, and it will size the bore, straighten it out and stuff like that. It's basically a very similar thing to what you'll find at the machine shop. It takes the same stones and brushes and everything else. I can thank my buddy Daniel Shears for sending me this. I didn't have to do it on this block because basically there was no bore wear. So the three-legged hone to scratch it up, and then the brush hone to nap it in, and finally, because it sat around for a long time, I hit it with the Scotch-Brite. So there you go. That's the whole story on the bore finish on this particular 440. What I have here is a motorhome 440. Now, I ran this on the dyno with the cam, headers, and an intake and a carb, and it made around 400 horsepower. But the problem with these engines is they have super low compression, like 7.2 to 7.5 to 1. So I decided I wanted to repiston it to get more power. So here it is. It's all apart. And I decided I'm going to do a YouTube series on the buildup of this engine. Now, it was kind of unique because the motorhome that it came out of was super, super low mileage. So there was no need to take this thing to the machine shop. The bores have basically zero wear. So I'm repistoning it at standard bore. I gave it a little bit of a hone, and everything else is just as I received it. Here on part one is get the block cleaned up for assembly, and then I'm going to paint it up with a paint job that'll last for years. Have a look at the bore where I've got a dial bore gauge, and I've already zeroed it at the bottom of the bore. You get nowhere there because the rings don't go that far. That's 0. Now I usually walk it all the way up and down, but let's just go to the point of maximum wear, which is right at the top of the ring travel. So what I have here is about 4/10, which is hardly anything. So 4/10,000ths of an inch. You can even have a couple of thou or 2.5 thou. That would run perfectly fine. I've run them a lot looser than that, but that's good. I've already scraped all the gaskets, so they're all gone, but there's still a little bit of staining, a couple of rust spots, maybe a tiny little fragment of gasket material left here and there. So what I do is I wire brush it. I'll hit it with a little penetrating oil wherever I'm going to work it. And you don't want a killer wire brush. I just have these light duty wire brush cups in a cordless drill, and that does the job. You don't want to ramrod it with an angle grinder or something like that because you don't want to take any metal off. Just a light touch is all it takes. And you can really see it clean up as you go. That's looking really good. I get the decks too. It's easier to get around the dowel pins like that with the wire wheel. Don't hit the cylinder walls. And by the way, you might notice these bores have a gigantic chamfer. That was factory on this particular block. You don't find that on all 440s, but this one has it. It is what it is. It's not going to hurt anything. Get the one cover like that. I'll get the decks. I'll get any machine surfaces, pan rail, the front cover area, and that way when I get to the next step of cleaning, it's going to be just pure clean bare metal. The next thing I like to do is blow out all of the bolt holes. Now, I've got penetrating oil in most of them and stuff like that, but what I don't want in there is a bunch of grit, silicone, gasket sealer, and stuff like that. You'd be surprised at all the junk that ends up in there, and sometimes never comes out even when you get a block back to the machine shop. So this is something I'll do every single time. You need a nozzle that's like this, a long nozzle so you can go all the way in the hole. You'll feel it bounce off the metal on the bottom when it's perfectly clean. Now, a lot of times, debris will get shot out of there really high pressure, and you want to put a glove on at least and some safety glasses because that grit kind of hurts. So I'm going to hook up the air hose and blow out all of the bolt holes. Because I did a Radican rebuild on this thing way back when I first got it, and when it came out of the motorhome, it was pretty greasy. So what I did was basically blocked off all of the entrances into the engine while it was completely assembled, and then I hot water pressure washed it. That got most of the grease off, and then I followed up with wire wheels, and I stripped the whole block down to bare metal, got all the blue paint off of it, repainted it Hemi orange, which was Chrysler's high performance color, and here it is. A few dyno runs later and a little part swapping. It's kind of a little oily, but way cleaner than what you can usually expect. If your engine is super greasy and you got fully disassembled, probably a trip to the machine shop's your best bet. Have the thing jet cleaned or hot tanked, and then you don't have to deal with all the grease. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use engine degreaser and these engine cleaning brushes. These are really worthwhile. If you're going to be working on engines, you should get a kit. They're not that expensive and come in super handy. I'm going to clean all of the oil galleries, and it is gallery, not galley. A galley is a Spanish ship, I think. A gallery is like a hallway or a pathway, and that's why it's called an oil gallery. So anyhow, I'm going to ramrod all those passages, lifter bores, clean the bores in here. Just hit everything with a brush and the degreaser and get it as clean as I can until I'm ready for the next step. This is where guys will usually break out the soap and water, hose the engine down, scrub it down with a sponge or a brush, and maybe some Tide detergent. But you know what? I gave up on that. I never do it anymore. And the reason is there is no way to prevent getting flash rust, like on your machine surfaces, the cylinder walls, maybe the decks, whatever you had machined, it's gonna flash rust. And I don't care how quick you are with the WD-40 or whatever you're gonna do, that's gonna happen every single time. So what do? I use this, a solvent sprayer and mineral spirits. And that will not rust, but it's gonna flush this thing out. It's gonna wash it down. It's going to remove all of that engine degreaser, and it's gonna leave me a surface that's really, really clean enough for paint. Now the paint on this thing looks really good because I had painted it a year or two ago, and it's still pretty nice. But I'm gonna go through the process, mask it up, shoot the color, shoot the clear, and then it's gonna be absolutely perfect. One of the things I like to do is mark to the gasket line, because oftentimes the parts don't mate exactly the same and you're going to have bare metal spots peeking through all over the place. So I'll mask it to my marked lines and I'll have complete paint coverage. I have it all masked up and it's ready to paint. A little tech tip. Now, a cast iron block is very porous and you're going to have moisture in those pores. You're going to have solvents, you're going to have oils, you're going to have all kinds of different contaminants. And the best thing you can do is burn it off before you paint. That's gonna give you the best paint adhesion. What I did is I heated my block with this torpedo heater for half an hour. I got it up to pretty warm, and then I'm sure my paint's gonna stick. Now let's talk about paint. Now this is going to be kind of a cheat. There's a lot of different things you can use. You can use base coat, clear coat, you can use single stage, you can use acrylic enamel, you can put a primer down if you want to. This is just something that works for me. I've tried it, I've painted a lot of engines using this technique. It's fast and it lasts. I've done some engines like 2 or 3 years ago that still look like I painted them yesterday. So let's get started. Here's the cheat. I use VHT spray bomb for the base coat. Now it's just like base coat, clear coat. This is the base, it provides the color and the coverage, and normally with these spray can engine enamels, you don't need any primer at all. Just give it a light dust coat and then follow up with a couple of good medium coats and that part's done. So, the only problem with any single stage product like this, it doesn't have a catalyst, it's not going to last that long, and it doesn't have very good chemical resistance. So what I do is I hit it with a catalyzed automotive urethane clear coat. I've got this stuff right here, and I'm going to use this cheapy touch-up gun, spray her down, and I'm going to have a finish that's going to last a really, really long time.